I don't hear me. Oh yeah. Oh my God. I don't know what was wrong. Why you guys couldn't hear me. So, okay, let's get it started. I'm probably going to have to chop this video up a little bit, but let's get it started. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Operation Hill 100 Heart channel where we focus on healing, humor, and hot topics. I am here because I want to discuss this Kalenna Harper interview. And I kept saying I was going to do it, but for whatever reason, I kept hesitating. I guess because, as you guys can see here on the screen, I have trigger warning because there was a lot of things in this interview that I'm like, okay, girl, what's going on here? Um, and I didn't know how much I wanted to share because this interview was kind of heavy. This interview was really, really heavy. So I'm going to say trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, because there was a lot of things that Kalenna said in this interview that can be very traumatizing, contingent upon what you've been through in your life. But so the name of well, they didn't give a name for the interview, but this Kalenna Harper interview was on Trapping Anonymous. Shout out Trapping Anonymous. I like the black and white effect. So the entire interview was in black and white. I like that effect, right? And it started off with she was saying her story is important because it resonates with trauma, healing, and becoming your whole self. Once again, trigger warning, this interview can be traumatizing. So, I just want to give you guys a heads up because Kalenna did share a lot of her life story and she does have a lot of trauma surrounding that, right? Okay. The interview started. His name is Chris. That was the interviewer's name, right? So he opened up the interview and he was asking Kalenna what was some of her best times in her life. And she said, aside from being a wife and a mom, it was being a part of Dirty Money with Diddy. Right. And Kalenna basically was sharing she has a lot of admiration and respect for Diddy as a mogul and all of the great things he's done in music and so on and so forth. Right. So she said she was anticipating working with him. She was very excited, about him recognizing her talent immediately because sometimes that can be a slow burn for folks. And she said she had heard about bad rumors and she had heard about rumors in the past that weren't so good, and she was like working with him. She heard that he can be a tyrant, he can be the devil, right? But she had got a different vibe when they worked together and she didn't get what everybody else got, right? Um in my personal opinion, I don't know how truthful Kalenna was being in this interview, but I listened and I tried to be as unbiased as possible, right? What she did say was she can see why certain things get said about Puff. She was like, she has witnessed some of his aggressive traits, and um, she's seen him, sometimes be really, 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 really like cut and dry, straight to the point. She said, but the way she grew up, which is in a very militant household under a Muslim stepfather, she was like that type of stuff didn't really get to her. She was pretty much used to you know, these type of behaviors from men, so when Puff would get like that, it would pretty much be like, okay, his bullshit moving right along, right? She was used to criticism from her stepdad, so that was nothing new for her. And she also kind of felt like the reason why Puff would be giving criticism or treating you any particular kind of way is because he was trying to teach you something. And she wanted to learn under him because she felt like he was a creative genius. So I was like, okay, Kalenna. So the interviewer made a valid correlation. He was like, since you have tough skin and you was raised a particular way, you that probably doesn't bother you. But everybody is not raised like you. So do you understand and see how other people could have been more sensitive to the way Puff was because they may not have had that tough skin like you did? And she was like, yeah, I could see that. So anywho, the interviewer, Chris, he dialed it back a little bit. He started talking about her upbringing. And he asked her, when did you decide to leave home and go out and share your gift with the world of music, right? So Kalenna says she left home at 17 years old. She graduated from high school and she was a licensed nail tech. She began to talk about her music and she began to talk about the dynamic of her relationship between her and her mother. Kalenna said her mom had her at 16 years old. They had a very rocky and tumultuous relationship. She said the final straw was one time her mother punched her in the face and made her eye bleed. She was like, she felt like at that point, I got to get up out of here. This is getting too volatile. This is not working. I need to get away from these people, right? You know what I found to be I found this to be so crazy because right before I watched the Kalenna interview, I watched the Meg Thee Stallion documentary, and just doing the comparisons between Meg Thee Stallion and her mom, Kalenna and her mom, it makes me so sad, but it also is a huge eye opener to see how folks were raised and how folks were treated in regards to who's the person raising them, right? So mothers and daughters relationships can also shape how women deal with every other woman in their life, right? And most times I see like when you've been like abused or anything by your mom, you usually don't have the best relationship when trying to relate to other women and so on and so forth. So I was a little sad that she said her and her mom had that type of relationship, right? So she said she left and she lived for a while in her car. It was between her car and the studio because she was trying to get her music career off the ground because she was like, if nothing else, I always knew I was talented in that area. She was like, but not even only just music. She shared she had a full scholarship to FAMU. She's a track star and she's also the sister of American Olympic athlete Nia Ali, right? So y'all Google her. I Googled her. She is really that girl, right? So then the conversation of the biological dad came up. Kiana, you hear me on Real Housewives of Potomac. Kalenna said that her mom was 16 years old and her dad was 24 years old when she was born. She said Kalenna was 14 years old when her grandmother actually revealed to her that her stepfather was not her biological dad. She was like, and her grandmother also shared with her that Kalenna was a product of a R word situation, right? And like Kalenna said, technically I was because it was statutory R word, but it wasn't like held down and taken from my mom, right? He just was so much older, right? And I was like, what is a 24-year-old see in a 16-year-old? But the world we live in, right? She said her dad was a performer, aka an exotic dancer, aka a stripper. So that was my other question. So if your dad was 24 years old, but he lived in such a fast life, I'm thinking that he's light years ahead of him. So I'll give him 30 mentally if he's out in the streets doing all of that. So how did you get with the 16-year-old? Was your mom again? She didn't go into all of that, right? So then comes what I said what I said, what a topic of discussion that's so incredibly important was that Kalenna's mom was uh, molested, right? And according to Kalenna, there was a lot of incest, and it was by her uncle, meaning her mother's brothers. There were a lot of pedos and R words, and it was. She showed both her uncles, who they considered to be the pedos and the R words in her family. And then she brought up something called emotional molestation, and she said, that's when a fit. She said her mom basically shared with her, everything she went through with her brothers when Kalenna was as young as like 7 years old. So I was like, wow, that is a lot to, tell a kid, right? And she said the mom told Kalenna that she caught her brother, Kalenna's uncle, having sex with a 3 year old. And her brother gave that baby syphilis and chlamydia. I was like, oh no, 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 no. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then Kalenna's mom told her it was both of her brothers, meaning Kalenna's uncles. Like she said, the grandmother was on heroin and left the children in an unsafe space and they were molested. It was two Swiss tested twins that were 11 months apart. So that's what made her uncle such predators. I was like, wow. Well, like I said, trigger warning, because that was definitely deep. I know for me, I was just looking at Kalenna like, oh my God, that's a lot to go through and also to be raised under. But she said her biological father has 33 children and she's the second oldest. Her father committed murder suicide. So he unalived himself after unaliving his mistress in front of their 7 year old daughter. I was like, what? So she said that she felt bad because her sister was left to deal with all the emotional trauma and everything that took place with that situation. And she was like, I basically abandoned my sister. Like I wasn't there for her in the time that she needed, but she was like, I really didn't know how to be. And I didn't really want to. I didn't want to deal with that emotional trauma. So I kind of just left her alone to deal with it. And she was like, she felt bad about that. If that's one thing she regret in her life, she said that's one of them. So she said she grew up in North Philly She was like, it was pretty much a good experience, right? She was in a lot of programs and clubs because she was gifted musically. And then the interviewer asked her about her mom now in current time. So Kalenna then went on to say that her mother is working to give her grandchildren, the best experience since she didn't have it. Right. And she was like, since her children were affected by being on TV and, getting teased and bullied and so on and so forth, she sent her children to live with her mother. Right. And they're living in the house that she bought for them. Kalina, why their kids couldn't live with you? Kalina, I'm not clear on what was going on with you that you couldn't have your children. I get that you want them to be close to their grandmother. That's the inevitable. Yes, they can go on holidays and during the summer. Why aren't you raising your children? And she never really got to the nitty gritty of that. She just tried to make it seem like, well, my mother needed to do something right, so she didn't do nothing right by me. That's pretty much the gist I got of it. And I feel like you're almost guilt tripping your mother by saying, hey, I'm buying you a house and you didn't raise me right, so now raise my kids. Kalina, so you can do what? So I wasn't clear on that, but okay, girl. She said she lost her baby brother in 2021, and when she did, she tried to make an attempt to get her kids back from her mom, but they were all too attached. So she said, you know what? Y'all stay together. Oh, okay. So then the conversation of marriage comes up. She said she's been married to her husband for 15 years. She seemed like she wasn't sure of that, so you guys can check the records. She said her husband has 11 children. When they met, he had 7, and during their relationship he had an outside child. And she was like, listen, we've been through our ups and downs. She said she's never cheated. She loves her husband and she has got offers from men to take care of her and she's declined. Kalina, I'm a little unclear because when I was watching you on Love and Hip Hop, what was that you were doing then? Because I know it was like at one point you and him were agreeing to bring outsiders into your marriage. That was one thing. But I also remember it was a time where he was like, I don't want to do that no more. And you still wanted to do it and you were still continuing to do it. You were also coming on to other women on the show. So are you sure you never cheated on? Never mind. Anyway, her husband Tony is her manager. The interviewer was being shady, asking about the dichotomy of their relationship because he's your assistant. That's what he was calling Kalena's husband, Tony, right? And Kalenna was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't play in my husband's face. Do not play in my husband's face. My husband has always been a get money nigga, right? It's just that I'm the face of us because I have the talent. He's in the background. But she was like, listen, when I met my husband, he was managing Jason Weaver, other DJs, actors. He's a real estate guru. His net worth is actually more than mine. So don't try to play in my motherfucking husband face, right? And I was thinking about it, like whether Kalenna was lying or not about her husband. I do like the fact that she jumped to his defense to let that interviewer know, sweetie, we're reunion, and don't ever try to play in his face because that means you're playing in mine. So I was like, okay, girl. Um, One thing I noticed that Kalenna kept doing in the interview, and this is what I wonder how truthful she was being. I felt like when she wasn't sure about something or when she wasn't telling the truth about something, she would look down and look away. I felt like when she knew she was confident in her answers or she knew she was telling the truth, she would look directly at the camera or at the interviewer. So a lot of times, whenever she was looking away, I felt like either A, she wasn't telling the truth or she wasn't sure of an answer. And for me, it's like she gave herself away, right? Um, she said on average at the height of her career, she was a millionaire. She said, but of course, as with us black people growing up in the ghetto with no financial literacy, so she made a lot of mistakes with money. And trust me, I can relate to that. She said there was a point in time when no money was coming in and she felt blackballed. She said she doesn't know if that was really the case and if so by who. She was like, but she's not black. She's not black now. And she said she can take accountability. She could take accountability if she was blocked because at some point she wasn't at her best self. She was going through stuff with her husband. She was stressed out. She was in a bad space. So it was like, well, we don't want to work with you, bitch, because you're a headache and a problem. And she was like, I could take accountability because at that time I was. Right. So then the interviewer finally gets to the part that we all want to hear about, which is her and Diddy and what she think of this whole situation. Right. So he was like, listen, what is your relationship like with you and Dawn? Right. Like when y'all was Diddy money, so on and so forth. Right. Um, Kalina, I'm not going to say you was lying, but this is just one of the parts where you looked away and down and not at the interviewer or the camera, right? She said, according to her, that Dawn wasn't sisterly. She was very closed off and they weren't like family. Right. And Kalina was like, and that's pretty much she was what she was looking for. So then the interviewer was asked like, so you were named a number of times in her lawsuit. And Kalina basically was like, listen, this is she is now moving forward, living her life, and and this shit comes out of nowhere. And she just felt like Dawn made it seem like this was happening right in front of her face, and she was just idly sitting by, like she said, and she had no idea. So what I got from Kalina, what she was saying right there is, let me see if I can give an example, right? You know how like your homegirl got a man, right? And you maybe like go to their house every now and again, and you're like the third wheel and yada yada yada. Now you're probably only coming over there on holidays, on birthdays, on the weekends, so you're not seeing them as much as, of course, they see each other. They could be locking ass all during the week, right? But on the weekends, they not to put in the front in front of you, like we all having a grand old time. So you're there thinking it's all good, right? And then when it come out like, yo, this nigga used to beat my ass, you like, girl, when? Because when I was hanging with y'all, it was all good. Yeah, we was making it look all good. So in my opinion, that's what Kalina was trying to say. She was trying to say like, now all of a sudden Diddy was whipping on you. I already know about that. And then on top of that, you making it seem like I was there turning the blind eye. But no, bitch, I ain't seen none of that shit you getting on with. Once again, I couldn't gauge if Kalina was telling the truth or not. What I could say is that when she went to respond, eyes down and away. And at that time, it made me feel like, are you sure? So she said, going into the situation, remember that Dawn was a part of Danity Kane, so they were closer. So she was like, they knew each other from then. So she assumed that Dawn's distance might have come from Kalina being the outsider. She was like, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of felt like it was a control thing on Diddy part to kind of keep us separate. She was like, but she felt like Dawn looked at her as competition. And she was like, but Kalina shared that she walked in the door with expectations and she held true to them. She was like, Dawn was a little bit more meek and scary, so she allowed certain things to happen. And Dawn was like, I wasn't having certain shit, and I came in the door saying I wasn't having that. So things pretty much worked out the way I needed them to for me. I can't speak about why things didn't work out for Dawn the way she needed them to. So Chris said, what do you make of the ingredients in the lawsuit? And Kalina flat out said, I think this is bullshit. She said, I think it's broke people doing anything for money. And she said that if all of this was going on, why didn't anybody say anything? Right. And as I always tell you guys, I very rarely, if any, have these conversations with anybody because, in my opinion, everybody played a part in what took place in these situations. And my personal opinion is that most times people only want to put the blame on somebody else, right? So, like the example I just gave you guys, like if I was going to my homegirl house and her man was in there fighting, right? You also were a part of keeping it a secret from me as well. And again, am I saying that validates him beating the shit out you? Absolutely not. But in order for it to stop, you would have had to say something, and you were a part of keeping that shit a secret. But once again, I learned with people that is whatever the more tragic situation is, then that's what we have to talk about. Forget about all the other things that's layered underneath the tragic situation that made it happen. And that's basically what I was saying in the Meg Thee Stallion documentary review. I was saying, do I think that Meg deserved to be assaulted and shot? Not at all. But I also feel like that there were things that took place prior to that folks needed to take accountability for, especially Meg. But we're not going there. We back on Kalina. So that's what she said. I heard her. Chris said, is it fair to say your upbringing probably wouldn't have given off that energy that suggests that Puff will be able to do that stuff to you, right? Because everybody is not like you, right? Um, and what I didn't understand, right, was that I remember was a time Dawn either told this story on an interview or somebody said Dawn said this, but they was like one time Diddy had Dawn so afraid that she called her dad, and basically the dad didn't do anything, or the dad was saying just leave there or something like that. And when she said that, I was just thinking to myself, like, first of all, if you had a dad to call, then he also should have been protecting you. Where was he when it was just sad? So Kalina said she felt like they were a group, and if nothing else, she could have spoken to her. And I was looking at Kalenna like, Kalenna, didn't you just say all the shit that you went through, you kept to yourself? Right? And you didn't even tell your family. So why would a stranger now come and tell another stranger all their fucking business, not knowing what the repercussions is going to be of that, and also telling you about the person that's our boss? Absolutely not. So no, Dawn couldn't just come and tell you that. That's not what could have happened, right? She said that they were such in such close proximity that if Dawn was going through all of that, it would have been impossible for her to miss. I said, I mean, or it would have been that I didn't give a fuck, right? So it could have been, listen, you letting this nigga talk crazy about you, you letting this nigga say all this shit about you, and you didn't allow that. So that's between y'all. So it's not necessarily probably that you missed it. You probably didn't give a fuck about it because it wasn't happening to you. But once again, I was not there. I do not know. And then Cassie conversation enters the chat. Whew, so she was like, she described Cassie as lovable, naive, likes to party, get high, well taken care of, etc., right? She said Cassie was very much put up in an all-white condo with 70-foot ceilings, and she said she had start when she started seeing how much money Cassie was getting, and she said she believes Cassie was getting about $30,000 to $50,000 a week dating Diddy. Oh my God. So she said she started asking Cassie, like, are you doing well with your money? Because, things can happen, right? And she said, Cassie just basically was like, listen, I'm young. I'm having a good old time. I'm dating a powerful man. He got money. I'm just maneuvering how I maneuver, right? So she said that Cassie had shared that she was ready to have a family. She was like, and Dirty Money was from 2009 to 2012. So Cassie was a young girl, just wanting to have fun when they were first introduced. She was like, but she as time went on, she started to want more out of the relationship that she had with Diddy. And Kalenna says she basically missed the whole hostage abuse situation. And when Kalenna said that, I looked at the TV and said, oh, conveniently you did, the same way you missed it with Dawn. So what I think happened here, and again, Kalenna, in all fairness to you, if you didn't want to be Captain Save a Hole, you didn't have to be, right? So I'm not blaming you, but at the same token, just be honest and say it wasn't my situation, so I didn't give a fuck. Because to keep acting like you were absolutely oblivious when this shit is happening, especially with Dawn. I don't know about with Cassie, but with Dawn, you just say you didn't care. Just say I really didn't care, right? So she shared that Cassie did vent about Diddy. She was like, but the way Cassie vented about Diddy is the way women vent about their men. And she was like, shit, I was there venting about my husband as well. So I'm looking at what she's telling me as normal because I'm here saying basically the same thing about my man. And then number two, you know, I have my own stuff going on. Ding, 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 ding. I knew that. That's what I just was saying all along. It's like, I want to worry about your shit, but bitch, I got my own shit, right? So what did he stomp you out? Okay, sorry to hear that. My man blacked my eye. Next subject, right? That's what it gave me. She was trying to say, right? She says she thinks it's great that Cassie spoke up and shared her rough times. She just wished that Cassie would have also shared the good times that she had with Puff. And Kalenna, I want to say something, right? And I want this to be loud and clear because I want this to boom all over the ghetto community. And I'm going to say ghetto and not black because ghetto does not have to always necessarily equate to black people. So, what I'm going to say is this message I want to put out there, I want it to boom across the ghetto community. Once again, I am not only speaking to black people, I only know black ghetto people, right? But I'm speaking to any group of people that present with these particular behaviors. And I want to say this message and let it boom in the ears of ghetto people, right? There are things that can happen to you, and there is so much trauma that you can grow through that you start to believe that that's normal. And when you start to believe that your trauma is normal, when you hear other people with similar trauma, you look at them like they are over exaggerating or overreacting because they are responding to this trauma in a particular way, whereas you now view it as normal, so you don't have the same response. And I'm going to give you guys my own personal example to bring my point home, right? I do not tolerate disrespect from men. I don't. I do not care who you are. As a man, if you disrespect me, I disconnect from you. I do not care what role you play in my life. And I'm telling y'all this because I went through years of not having a good relationship with my father because of this. I am not going to tolerate disrespect from a man. I'm not going to tolerate what I view as disrespect from a man. Granted, maybe the man is looking at me like, I didn't feel like I disrespected you. Oh, well, I do. And because of that, it does not matter who you are in my life, I will cut you off. Now, I remember that I would have friends, like, say, case in point, it would be me and a friend, right? And we start dating two guys, right? And let's just say her and her guy always argue. FUB, suck my this. That's what they do, right? They do it all the time. Me and my guy see them do it. We don't say nothing. We don't get into it, right? But now when my guy turns around and does that to me, I'm like, I'm done with him. And my friend like, oh, you overreacted. It's not that serious. He only said it one time. You see that right there? You're trying to normalize disrespect for me. And when I'm trying to cut it off and not allow it, you're trying to make me look like I'm overreacting or I'm doing something wrong. I'm not. And I learned that about the ghetto culture, right? It's like they normalize so much trauma that when you try to take away from it or not allow it, you're looked at as overreacting, bugging out, doing too much. No, this is not normal. This is not normal. So I feel like with Kalenna, it was almost like, yeah, Cassie probably was there telling you he's punching me in my stomach, dragging me, stomping me, kicking me, cursing me out, cheating on me. And you looking at it as like, girl, Tony did way worse than that. Girl, get over it, move on. And it's quote unquote normal. No, for me, it's not. For me, it's not. And like I said, I'll give you guys a personal story. So my family is connected to another family, right? And in some ways they are blood related, and some ways it's just we're just that close, right? So it was a male in their family who was a cousin, so I considered him my cousin, right? Again, we're not blood related, but we're so close and grew up together. Prior to this situation, him and I never had an issue. As a matter of fact, when I was young, I actually had a crush on him, right? But again, it's like it's your family, you can't have a crush on your family, whatever, right? So now in our older years, one time he kind of had got to a point in his life where he felt like he was like a celebrity, like right, like whenever he come around, like everybody's saying do what he want. And for me personally, that didn't bother me because I'm just looking at him as like the cool cuz. I see everybody else maneuver and shake when you say so, but that have nothing to do with me. You just the cool cuz, right? So I guess because he had gotten the mindset of, pretty much everybody shakes and moves the way I want them to. One day he called my phone. So when he called my phone, I was home. So I seen his call and I let it go to voicemail, right? He didn't text or anything after, so I didn't assume it was anything important. And in my mind, I'm like, I see him when I see him. If it's not important, let's move on, right? So maybe about 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my old neighborhood and he pulled up in a car. And when he got out the car, he looks at me and he says, oh, there go this bitch right here. Excuse me? So now he's laughing, but my face is serious. Excuse me? I think that happened. I want to tell y'all that happened 2014. Here we are 10 years later. I ain't speak to the motherfucker since. Since. And a couple of years ago, when he was trying to befriend me, he kept trying to tell people, like, oh, tell DJ I was only playing. It wasn't that serious. She ain't got to treat her cuz like that. See how she cutting her cuz off. If I was your cuz, why do you speak to your mother that way? Do you speak to your sisters that way? Do you speak to your daughter that way? So why are you calling me bitches? But again, that's normalized in ghetto culture. So I'm supposed to be okay with that, and me and you supposed to laugh that off? Absolutely not. I don't let men disrespect me, and I feel disrespected. So once again, Kalenna, I think for you looking at Cassie and Dawn like maybe they bugging out and they're overreacting because they made us beating shit out them, stomping them and dragging them and cheating on them and whipping them and throwing them in the booth and shutting off whole hotel floors so they could beat you down to the ground and launch vases at you. That probably was normal for you and Tony. That's not normal for everybody, baby. So yeah, that was just sad to see that, she basically was like, listen, I didn't know what was going on. And in my opinion, it wasn't that deep. I said, oh, okay, girl. Um, so, and also them speaking about Diddy's greatest moments, they're null and void when so many of the moments that they had with him was bad, right? So now the interviewer asked, he was like, what's one of the worst things you've ever seen in Hollywood? And she said watching her friends transform into like sexual deviants and basically strangers who she feel like she don't even know no more, right? And she was like, everybody conforms because you keep hearing that sex sells. So now, in order for them to conform to that sexual deviant kind of person, it's a whole lot of drugs and drinking and so on and so forth. And she was like, they just become a shell of who they are. And for her, that's very hard to watch. And I was like, Kalenna, aren't you? Never mind. He asked about the after parties. Kalenna said, I don't know nothing, and I still use baby oil. Leave me the fuck alone. Right? They asked about Diddy's bail getting revoked. And she was like, she feels really bad that his bail got revoked because that's a large part of she plays a large part in that because they saw that he called her 56 times because she was mentioned in Dawn's lawsuit. Right? So when Kalenna broke this part down right here, I said, Kalenna girl, you quick, right? But you ain't the road runner. No, baby, you quick, but you ain't the road runner. So what you just tried to get over on us right now, you're probably a fool would have fell for that, but absolutely not, Kalenna. So what she said, right, was she was like, you know how like somebody do some bullshit to you, right? And you got somebody close to you. So you want to vent about the bullshit that happened to you. So you like say like it's your mom. You call me like, yo, ma, you know this bitch gonna say da. All right, boom. And the mother say, oh, you gotta call me right back. So she was like, you're constantly calling back that day to keep venting about that situation with the person you know and trust and love because you know this is some bullshit and you want to talk about it, right? She was like, that's pretty much what happened with Diddy that day. Once Diddy was made aware that Dawn had said all of this, you know, then the phone calls came in because she was like, that's my dude. That's my dude. And he know I was there. And he was like, so I'm like, okay, well, let's chop it up about this. And she was like, you know, I want to come forth and stand on business for him. She was like, so we basically was speaking about the what that's gonna look like. She was like, because you know, I can be ghetto and ratchet and you know, make things come out wrong. And I don't want to do that. I want the message to be clear about what I'm trying to say. So yes, we was chopping it up. And I'm thinking to myself, Kalenna, you don't know that you may have just exposed Diddy for witness tampering by him. I hear you, girl. That he was coaching you on the phone on what to say, because girl, if you girl, Kalenna, okay, girl. So basically, what she said after that was she was like, listen, I'm going to stand on business when it comes to him. And the business that I'm standing on is yes, motherfuckers is freaky, motherfuckers is nasty, motherfuckers is dirty, but motherfuckers ain't illegal, right? And she was like, it's a lot of shit that went on in my home, your home, and everybody else's home that was nasty and freaky and dirty. Is the difference is it wasn't illegal. And she was like, do I feel like, you know, he might have been on some freaking, yeah, 100%. She was like, but we talking about bestiality and molestation and all that. She was like, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that part of it, right? She says, I do feel like this is the shakedown of a black man. And she said, I feel like everybody else is participating for a money grab, right? And then she started talking about how much she values Diddy. She was like, you know, he's done a lot for her. She was like, when she used to get paid, when he used to pay them for, you know, working and on tour and all of that, she used to buy him nice things to show him, like, I really, really appreciate you. So she'll give him like a pair of sneakers, some nice art to show him, like, you know, I fucks with you. And what you doing for me, nobody don't have to do that for me. So I was like, okay, girl, I got it. That's your homeboy, right? She also says she does not appreciate being named in Dawn's lawsuit, but she will not be bullied into lying about what she was privy to, right? And I was like, okay, Kalenna girl. And then the interviewer asked about producers taking advantage of artists and using a full sense of opportunity to get what they want. And I'm thinking in my mind, he's actually talking about Diddy and how he was acting like he was going to put out all 10 of Cassie albums, or really he want to fucking fight her. But do you have any answers to that, Kalenna? So Kalenna just basically was like, she had her own situation with a producer named Jay Littlejohn, who he kept making it seem like when she came over to the studio that they would record, but then he would just lay her down and screw her. She was very, very young. She was taken advantage of. Her father left her there. Trigger warning, right? And you know what I saw Kalenna do? Like every time it was her situation, it was things like she was vampired and molested and all of these colorful nouns that she could bring up when the situation pertains to her and the person that took advantage of her. But when you speak about Diddy and how many others he's taken advantage of, he's the king of the castle and he's the grand guru and he's just being railroaded. And I'm looking like, but Kalenna, the same things that you're saying was done to you, folks are saying he did to them. What makes those two people different? The fact that he your homeboy? But okay, girl, I hear you, right? And she said she talked a lot about how women are pretty much treated like sexual objects in the industry, and she feels like if it's okay because that makes them popular, famous, or a star. Now, this last part right here really resonated with me that Kalenna said, and it's just because to some degree I agree, so I understood her point. So she said, I just want us to be accountable for the things that we do. I don't want to be the kind of woman in this movement to say, well, I was victimized. I know when I wanted to fuck somebody, they knew it too. It was very evident. And I also knew when I didn't like somebody and I was taken advantage of. And that part is the perfect rendition of what I'm trying to say. First of all, I love the fact that she used the word accountability, right? I love that. Secondly, I like the fact that she said, but on top of being accountable, there are times where I have been taken advantage of, and I want to acknowledge that as well. And I think that once again, everybody wants to make it seem like it's black and white. No, it's really gray. It's really great. And we have to address them gray areas to really get down to the root of the problem. And I don't think anybody wants to address the gray areas because they're so busy worrying about what happened at the end result. No, but how did we get here? How did we get here? And my thing is like that's like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. You know what I'm saying? If you go into the operating room and a person says, well, oh, my stomach is hurting, oh, and I'm just going to give you an aspirin. No, I need to go in and take your appendix out so your stomach will no longer hurt. I need to get to the root of why your stomach is hurting. And I think people just focus on the fact that it's hurting as opposed to what is causing the pain. And I see that a lot of times, right? So, anywho, Chris was like, what's your favorite memory of Diddy? And she said she remembers one time he was making a lot of money and he was just not being mindful, right? He was coming in late, throwing the money in, he was putting it in the drawer, putting it in the cabinet, not locking shit up, yada, yada, yada. And he was like, after a while, he was like, well, I wonder, do I have all my money? Because I'm never sitting around counting all of it. And I'm just leaving it anywhere. So he decided to put a nanny cam in his house, and he had found out that the nanny that he had for 15 years was stealing from him. And she was like, that the reason why that's her favorite memory because it taught her a lesson. She was like, because one, you know how important it is to monitor who you keep around you, and two, some of your most closest people to you can hurt you. She was like, so that let me know. He taught me something in those moments about being a woman, right? And the interviewer asked, what was your worst memory of Diddy? She said, I have no worst memories. Oh, okay, Kalenna girl. And pretty much new music on the way. She's back in the game. Her mom is still raising her kids, yada yada yada. That was the long and the short of the interview. And I mean, did I enjoy it? I don't necessarily know if I disliked it or liked it, but I did like hearing another person's perspective that was present. I think that some things were was her trying to two things. I think one part was her trying to create a better narrative surrounding Puff, but then the other part of that is something that I want to say because it happens to me often as well. Is sometimes she does have a better sometimes that person, meaning Kalenna or anybody in that position, does have a better narrative. I'll give you guys an example. I have a friend and a relative who they're not the best to women, and I don't mean physically. I mean emotionally they are not the best to women, right? They don't always treat them the best, right? And a lot of times I'm pretty sure those women who were romantically involved with those two men, my friend and my family member, I'm pretty sure they got stories for days that if I didn't know my friend and my family member, I'd be looking like that motherfucker's a piece of fucking work. And even if they told them to me right now, I would still be saying they're a piece of work. But if you're asking me how I feel about my friend and my family member, I love them. I want the best for them. I've had my best times with them. So I think that is twofold for Kalenna. I think a part of it is I want to help change the narrative surrounding you because you done got yourself into some shit, bro. But I think the other part also could be, and I also haven't experienced what these people experienced with you, right? Either way, we're going to let the courts call it, right? But ladies and gentlemen, that was the interview. I promised I would give it to you guys. Like I said, I truly learned there was some gems dropped on me. I learned some lessons here. Like I told you, one of the things that she said that really stuck with me, and I'm going to continue to, echo that because to me it makes sense regarding all of these things that are happening now. She said, I just want us to be accountable for the things that we do. I don't want to be the kind of woman in this movement to say, well, I was victimized. I know when I wanted to fuck somebody, they knew it too. It was very evident. And I also knew when I didn't like somebody and when I was taken advantage of. And that was really, really a jewel to keep in mind when we're having these conversations about our own behaviors and other folks' behaviors regarding us. In any event, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed my review of this interview. Please do not forget. Oh shit.